I still remember that morning as if it happened yesterday. The sunlight was slipping through the curtains, touching the kitchen tiles. And I was making coffee, 2 cups, as always. One for me and one for my husband. Keith, it was our small morning ritual. Something that made me feel like our marriage still had warmth. I didn't know that morning would be the last time I felt peace for a long, long time. The house was quiet, unusually quiet. My sister Sharon had been staying with us for a few months. She said she needed a place to stay after breaking up with her boyfriend. I didn't hesitate. She was my sister, my only family left after our parents passed. I opened my home, my heart, and I thought, I trust. When I went upstairs to call them for breakfast, the door to the guest room was open. The bed was unmade and her suitcase was gone. My chest tightened. I called her name once, twice, no answer. Then I called Keith. His phone rang from the nightstand. I remember standing there, my hands trembling as I looked around, realizing something wasn't right. That's when I saw the envelope on the table. My name was written in Sharon's handwriting to my dearest sister. I opened it. And as I read the words, my world shattered piece by piece. She wrote, "I'm sorry. Please take care of him. I can't do it anymore." At first, I didn't understand. Take care of who? Then I heard a faint cry, a baby, in the living room. When I walked in, I saw a small baby wrapped in a thin blanket on the couch. There was another note lying beside him. This one from Keith. His words still echo in my head. We had to leave. He's sick. He doesn't have much time left. Maybe you can give him something we couldn't. My legs gave out. I fell to the floor holding the baby as tears blurred my vision. My husband, my sister, gone. And all they left behind was a dying child and a trail of betrayal I never saw coming. I didn't even know whose baby he was hers. But as that tiny boy opened his weak eyes and looked at me, I knew one thing: I couldn't let him die. I called the hospital that day. The baby's breathing was weak, his skin pale. The doctors told me his condition was critical, something about a heart defect that needed surgery. When they asked about his parents, I froze. What could I say? That my husband and my sister ran away and left him here to die? I simply whispered, "I'm his guardian." Days turned into nights. And I stayed beside that fragile little soul, praying, hoping. I named him Ethan. It was Keith's favorite name, the one we had chosen if we ever had a son. Ironic, isn't it? I gave that name to a baby left by the very man who betrayed me. The doctors weren't sure if he'd make it. But something inside me refused to give up. I sold my jewelry, my car, everything we had built together. I didn't care about anything except giving Ethan a chance at life. I remember holding his tiny hand through the glass of the incubator, whispering, "You're not alone. Sweetheart, I won't let them win. Not this time." Months passed. Ethan fought harder than anyone I'd ever known. He survived the surgery, and slowly the color came back to his cheeks. Every breath he took reminded me that love, real love, doesn't come from blood. It comes from choice. Still, the nights were lonely. There were moments I'd sit by his crib and cry silently, wondering how my own sister could do this to me. I replayed every memory, every shared secret, every laugh until they felt like lies. One night, as I rocked Ethan to sleep, I found the strength to forgive, not for them, but for me. Hatred was eating me alive. I whispered into the darkness, "You took everything from me, Sharon, but I'll still choose love. I'll raise him like he's my own." Years went by. Ethan grew into a bright, gentle boy with the kindest smile. He never asked about his parents, not at first. I told him stories of courage, of faith, of people who find light even in the darkest places. I wanted him to grow up knowing strength, not sadness. Then one day, when he was about 10, he came to me and asked, "Mom, why don't I look like you?" My heart sank. I looked into his innocent eyes and said, "Because you were chosen. Ethan, some children come from the womb, and others come from the heart." He smiled, hugged me, and whispered, "Then I came from your heart." That night, I cried again, but for the first time, they were tears of peace. I thought that chapter of my life was closed forever. I thought they'd never come back. But life has a cruel way of testing your peace just when you start to heal. Because 15 years later, the day Ethan turned 16, they did come back. Sharon and Keith, and they weren't alone. It was a warm afternoon when the past came knocking on my door, literally. I was in the garden, trimming the roses. Ethan had planted for me on Mother's Day. He was out with friends, laughing, living a life that once felt impossible. The sound of tires on gravel pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned, expecting maybe a delivery truck. But when I saw them step out of that shiny black car, my world froze again. Sharon and Keith. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Sharon looked older, but her eyes, those same deceitful eyes, still carried that self-serving shine. Keith stood beside her, his hand resting casually on her shoulder, as if nothing had ever happened. My heart pounded. Memories flooded in: the betrayal, the hospital, the baby's cries. I gripped the garden shears tighter, not out of anger, but to keep myself from collapsing. Sharon smiled nervously. "Hey sis," she said softly, as if we'd spoken just yesterday. I didn't respond. I just stared. Then Keith spoke, "You look." Well, the sound of his voice sent a chill down my spine. "What are you doing here?" I finally managed to ask. Sharon took a step closer. "We came to see Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "We thought, maybe now we could." I cut her off. "See him? After 15 years? After you left him to die?" My voice cracked, but I didn't care. Keith tried to speak. "You don't understand. No," I interrupted. "You don't understand. You walked out on a dying child, on a marriage, on a family. You left me to clean up the pieces of your mistakes." Sharon's eyes filled with tears. "He wasn't supposed to survive," she whispered. Her words hit me like a blade. "Then why are you here now?" I demanded. "To see if your prediction failed?" They looked at each other, guilty and nervous. Then Sharon said something that made my stomach twist. "We're not here just to see him. We're here because we need him." I froze. "Need him?" Keith nodded, avoiding my eyes. "He's a match. For our daughter, she's sick. We need a transplant." For a second, everything went silent. No wind, no sound. Just the heavy thud of my heartbeat. Their daughter. Their daughter. The life they built after destroying mine. I wanted to scream. But instead, I whispered, "You came back not for forgiveness, not for love, but for help." Keith sighed. "Please, we wouldn't ask if we had a choice." Sharon added, "He deserves to know who he really is." I stepped back, my voice trembling with fury and heartbreak. "You don't get to decide what he deserves. You gave up that right 15 years ago." I turned away, tears burning down my cheeks. "Get off my property before I forget who I am." They left without another word. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't over. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept pacing the floor, my mind spinning like a storm that wouldn't stop. I didn't know what to do. Should I tell Ethan? Should I hide the truth forever? He was 16 now, full of dreams and innocence, unaware of the darkness that had shaped his beginning. By morning, I had made a decision. He deserved honesty. No more secrets. When Ethan came home from school, his face was glowing as usual. "Hey, Mom. You won't believe it. I got picked for the science fair finals," he said excitedly, holding up his project form. I smiled weakly, trying to hold myself together. "That's amazing, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "Come sit with me for a moment. There's something we need to talk about." He frowned, sensing my tone. "Is everything okay?" I nodded, though my heart was breaking. "Ethan, you know I've always told you that love doesn't have to come from blood, right?" "Yeah," he said softly. "You always said that." I took a deep breath. "It's time you know the truth. The people who gave birth to you. They came today." His eyes widened. "My real parents?" I nodded slowly, tears already stinging my eyes. "Yes, your mother was my sister, Sharon, and your father." My voice broke. "Was my husband Keith?" Ethan froze, confusion spreading across his face. "What?" "They left you with me when you were a baby," I continued, my voice shaking. "You were very sick. They thought you wouldn't survive, and they ran away. I raised you because I couldn't let you die." He stared at me, disbelief turning into pain. "You mean they're your sister and your husband?" "My parents?" "Yes," I whispered. He stood up, pacing. "So all these years, my real parents were alive and you never told me?" I felt my throat tighten. "I wanted to protect you. They didn't deserve to have you back. You were safe, loved. But I had the right to know," he shouted, his voice cracking. Tears filled his eyes. "You should have told me, Mom." Hearing him call me Mom, even through anger, broke me completely. I reached for him, but he pulled away. He turned toward the door. "Where are you going?" I asked, panic rising. "I need to see them," he said, his voice trembling. "I need to know why." Before I could stop him, he ran out. I collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. I had kept that secret for 16 years to protect him, but now it had exploded in my face. Outside, the sun was setting just like it had the day they left. As I looked through the window, a single thought kept echoing in my mind. The past never dies. It just waits for the right moment to come knocking again. Ethan didn't come home that night. I waited by the window, the same way I used to when he was little and late from school, but this time, my heart carried a different fear, the fear of losing him too. When the clock struck midnight, I finally called his phone. No answer, again and again. Finally, a message appeared. It was short. "I'm with them. I need answers." My knees went weak. I sat there, clutching the phone to my chest, tears streaming down my face. I had always known this day would come, but not like this. Hours later, I heard the front door open. Ethan walked in. His face was pale, his eyes red. He looked older somehow, as if the truth had stolen his youth overnight. I stood up, trying to read his expression. "Ethan." He didn't answer. He walked past me and sat down at the kitchen table. After a long silence, he finally said, "They told me everything." My throat tightened. "Everything." He nodded slowly. "About how they fell in love? About how they ran away? About how they left me because they couldn't handle having a sick child? They said they thought I would die, and they didn't want to watch it happen?" His voice trembled. "They said they were young, scared, and stupid. I closed my eyes, every word cutting deeper. He looked at me then, those same eyes that had once looked up at me from a crib, now filled with pain. They told me about their daughter. She's really sick, Mom. She might die without a transplant. I swallowed hard. And they want your help. He nodded. They said I'm a match. Silence filled the room like a heavy fog. I wanted to scream, to tell him not to even think about it. But then he said something that broke me. Mom, what if I can save her? What if I can do for her what you did for me? I stared at him, my heart torn in two. The little boy I'd saved had grown into a man with a heart far bigger than the people who gave him life. I sat down beside him, my hands shaking. Ethan, I'm proud of the man you've become. But don't let them use your kindness to fix their guilt. He reached over and took my hand gently. I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it because you taught me love means forgiveness. His words shattered me completely. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, caught between fear and pride. I had raised him to be strong, compassionate, brave, and now he was all of those things. Even if it meant breaking my heart in the process. By morning, he had packed a small bag. I'm going to the hospital, he said softly. They're running the test today. As I watched him leave, I realized something I had never wanted to face. Sometimes love means letting go. The next few days passed like a blur. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and memories I'd tried so hard to forget. Every beep of the machines. Every faint echo of footsteps in the corridor, it all brought me back to the night. Ethan almost died in that same place 16 years ago. I stood outside the room where Sharon sat, nervously twisting her wedding ring. Keith was beside her, his face pale and lined with guilt. I didn't want to go in, but I couldn't stay away either. Ethan had asked me to come. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. Mom, he said softly, reaching out his hand. I went to him and he squeezed my fingers, smiling faintly. The tests came back positive. I'm a perfect match. My heart both lifted and sank. Sharon started to cry quietly, whispering, "Thank God," but the sound of her relief made something inside me ache. Ethan looked at her. You don't need to thank God, he said calmly. You need to thank her. He looked toward me. She's the reason I'm even alive to help you. Sharon's eyes met mine, and for the first time in years, I saw real shame in them. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. I don't deserve forgiveness. I stayed silent. There were no words big enough for what I felt. Anger, grief, exhaustion, love. They were all tangled together, like the pieces of a life I'd tried to rebuild from nothing. Keith spoke then, his voice low. I wanted to come back years ago, but Sharon was afraid. She thought you'd never let us see him. She was right, I said quietly. You abandoned us. You made your choice. He nodded, looking down. And we've paid for it every single day. There was a long silence before Ethan spoke again. I don't hate you, he said to them, but you have to understand something. Love isn't something you can just come back to when you need it. You left me when I needed you most, and he looked at me. She became my everything. Tears streamed down Sharon's face. I know, she whispered, and I'll never forgive myself for that. The nurse entered then, asking Ethan to prepare for the operation. Sharon reached out instinctively, wait, but he stepped back. It's okay, he said softly. Let's just do this. As they wheeled him away, I followed until the hallway ended. I pressed my hand against the glass of the operating room door, whispering a silent prayer. For the first time in years, I didn't pray for revenge. I prayed for strength for Ethan, for the little girl who didn't deserve to pay for her parents' sins, and even for Sharon, who finally seemed to understand what pain truly was. I stood there trembling, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything forever. The waiting room was painfully silent, the kind of silence that makes every second feel like a lifetime. I sat there staring at the small light above the operating room door. It was red. In progress. Sharon sat across from me, clutching a rosary between her trembling fingers. Keith leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. None of us spoke. We didn't have to. The air was thick with everything we'd never said: regret, guilt, love, and fear. After what felt like forever, a nurse finally came out. The procedure's going well, she said softly. Both donors and recipients are stable so far. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My hands were cold, but my heart felt a flicker of relief. Hours later, the doctor came out with a tired smile. It was successful. Both are stable, but we'll keep them under observation. Sharon broke down crying, collapsing into Keith's arms. I stayed still, too drained to move. All I could think about was Ethan, my boy, lying somewhere behind those walls. Pale and exhausted, but alive. When they finally allowed us to see him, I walked in quietly. He was sleeping, his face peaceful, the faint rhythm of the heart monitor echoing softly. I brushed the hair from his forehead and whispered, "You did it, my love. You saved a life just like you were meant to." Behind me, I heard footsteps. Sharon stood at the door, her eyes swollen from crying. "Can I?" she asked softly. I nodded. She came closer, looking at Ethan as if seeing him for the first time. Her lips trembled. "He looks just like Keith when he sleeps," she said, her voice breaking. "But his heart, it's yours." I looked at her. No, Sharon, I said quietly. His heart is his own. Strong, pure, forgiving. Something neither of us deserved. She broke down again, clutching the rail of his bed. I can't take this anymore, she sobbed. I've been living a lie for years. We didn't just run away because of fear. We ran because I made him. I frowned. What do you mean? She turned toward me, tears streaming. When I found out I was pregnant, I told Keith the baby wasn't his. I told him it was someone else's just to drive him away from you. But when Ethan was born, I realized he was his. I lied to everyone. And when he got sick, I couldn't face the truth. I was a coward. Her words hit me like thunder. You mean Ethan? Yes, she whispered. He's Keith's son. Your husband's child, not mine. I couldn't live with it, so I told everyone he was mine. And left him with you. My heart stopped. The room spun. All these years, the child I'd raised, loved, and fought for wasn't my sister's son. He was my husband's. And mine in a way I never could have imagined. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The sound of the heart monitor behind Ethan became distant, almost hollow. Like the world itself had gone silent to let the truth echo inside my head. Sharon's words replayed again and again. He's Keith's son, not mine. It didn't make sense. I shook my head slowly, whispering, no, that can't be true. You said, I lied, she cried, falling to her knees beside Ethan's bed. I was jealous. You had everything, love. A husband who adored you, a life I could never have. And when I realized I was pregnant, I thought if I could just take something from you, I'd finally feel equal. I stared at her, numb. My voice was barely a whisper. So you stole my husband, and then left his son for dead? Her sobs grew louder. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I can never undo it. But please, don't hate him for what we did. I could never hate Ethan, I said, my voice trembling. He's the only good thing that ever came out of all this. Sharon buried her face in her hands. When we ran away, I thought time would make the guilt fade. But every year, every birthday, every night I heard a child cry, I thought of him. I thought of you. For the first time in years, I saw my sister not as the woman who destroyed me, but as a broken soul carrying her own punishment. Still, my heart was too shattered to offer comfort. At that moment, the door opened. Keith stepped in quietly, his eyes flicking from Sharon to me. You told her, he said, his voice low and heavy. She nodded through tears. She had to know. He looked at me then, really looked for the first time in 15 years. I didn't know until months after you disappeared, he said. I found out the truth, but it was too late. Sharon wanted to move away, start over, and I was too much of a coward to face you. I turned away, unable to meet his eyes. You were always a coward. Keith, I spent years saving the life you both threw away, and now you want what? Closure? He sighed deeply. No, I want forgiveness. Not for me. For him. He deserves to know his real father. I clenched my fists. He already has a father, me. I raised him. I held his hand through surgeries, through nightmares. Through every moment you should have been there. You don't get to claim him now. Keith's eyes welled up. You're right, he said softly. I lost that right a long time ago. He turned to Sharon, his voice cold. You destroyed everything. But I'll live with that. You wanted to take her life from her, and you took mine too. She broke down again, whispering, I'm sorry, over and over as if the words could rebuild what she had burned. I looked at them both, two people who had taken everything from me, and realized something unexpected. I didn't hate them anymore. I pitied them. The door creaked softly, and a faint voice broke the heavy silence. Why are you all crying? My heart stopped. Ethan was awake. I turned, rushing to his side. His eyes fluttered open, still weak from the surgery, but alert to alert. He looked from me to Sharon, then to Keith, confusion clouding his face. What's going on? He whispered. I forced a smile, brushing his hair gently. Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. Just rest. But Sharon couldn't hold back her guilt any longer. No, she said shakily. He deserves the truth. I shot her a warning look, but it was too late. She took a step forward, her voice trembling. Ethan, there's something you don't know about who you are. His gaze flicked between us. I already know. You're my biological mother. Keith's my father. You left me because I was sick. Her lips quivered. That's not the whole truth. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered. You're not my son, Ethan. You're hers. You're your mother's. Your real mother's. He froze. What? She pointed to me. You belong to her. She carried you. You're the child of the woman who raised you. And the man who betrayed her? Ethan's face went pale. That can't be. Keith stepped forward, his voice low and broken. It's true, Sharon lied. I never knew until much later. Ethan looked at me, eyes wide with disbelief. Mom, is that true? You're my real mother? I felt the world tilt around me. Tears filled my eyes. I reached for his hand. I didn't know Ethan, I swear. I found out just now, like you. He blinked rapidly, struggling to process everything. So all these years, you raised me thinking I was hers? And you still loved me? I squeezed his hand tighter. I loved you before I even knew why, Ethan. Maybe my heart always knew. He turned his face away, tears rolling silently down his cheeks. You saved me, he whispered. You gave me life twice. Sharon sobbed quietly in the corner. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I thought I was protecting myself. But I destroyed everything. Ethan looked at her, his expression full of pain but not hatred. You didn't destroy me, he said softly. You just gave me to the person who was meant to love me the most. Keith broke down then, covering his face with both hands. For once, the man who had always run from consequences was silent and small. The room filled with quiet tears. No one moved, no one spoke. Just the sound of Ethan's heartbeat on the monitor. Steady and strong. A reminder that life, no matter how broken, finds its way back. He looked at me again, eyes glistening. You're my mom, he said. Not because of blood, but because you chose me. And now, I know you always were. I hugged him gently, holding him as the years of pain melted away between us. For the first time, I felt whole. The next morning, the light streamed softly through the hospital blinds, wrapping the room in a quiet warmth. I sat by Ethan's bedside, watching him sleep peacefully. For the first time in 15 years, there was no fear in my heart, only peace. Sharon sat across from me, her face pale and tired. The years of guilt had finally caught up to her. She looked at me with eyes that begged for forgiveness, but words failed her. When Ethan stirred awake, his first word was, Mom. I smiled faintly. Yes, honey. He reached for my hand. Promise me one thing. Don't let hate take the rest of your life. You already lost enough because of them. Don't lose yourself too. His words hit deeper than any truth could. I nodded slowly, tears welling up. I promise. A few days later, Ethan was discharged. The doctor said his recovery was a miracle, that somehow his heart was stronger than expected. I knew why. The truth had finally set him free. We went home, the three of us, me, Sharon, and Ethan. Keith didn't come. He couldn't face what he'd done. I heard later he left town for good. Maybe that was his way of punishment, or maybe he was just running again. Either way, I no longer cared. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Sharon stood on my porch holding a small box. This was yours, she said softly, handing it to me. Inside was my old wedding ring, the one Keith had taken the day he left with her. I looked at it for a long moment, then closed the box gently. I don't need it, I said. The woman who wore that ring doesn't exist anymore. She wiped her tears, whispering, You've always been stronger than me. I shook my head. No. I just learned that love doesn't die when people betray you, it transforms. It becomes wisdom. She nodded slowly, then said something I'll never forget. Maybe someday you'll forgive me. I looked into her tearful eyes. Maybe someday. I already have. It wasn't instant. It wasn't easy. But over the next few months, we began to heal. Ethan started college. Determined to study medicine, he wanted to save lives the way others had saved his. Sharon stayed in town, working quietly, trying to rebuild what little was left of her soul. Sometimes we'd sit together on the porch, silent but connected by something stronger than blood. The shared pain that once tore us apart but now held us together. 15 years ago, I thought betrayal had destroyed me, but now I know it remade me. I learned that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the power to set yourself free from the prison of your past. As the sun set over our quiet street, Ethan came out laughing, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. Mom, he said with a smile that healed every scar inside me. You were right, family isn't who stays when it's easy. It's who stands with you when it's hardest. I looked at him, my son, my miracle, and whispered, And you, Ethan, are my reason to keep believing in love. Life had come full circle. The pain, the betrayal, the years of loneliness all led me here. To peace, to truth, to love. And as I sat there watching the stars appear, I realized that sometimes the hardest goodbyes lead to the most beautiful beginnings. This was my story. A story of betrayal, forgiveness, and finding light again even after the darkest storm. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Tell me in the comments what would you have done in my place. Because every story has 2 sides. But healing begins when we finally face our own.